Hi, patch 9.1 is hitting next week, so I wanted to make a second video on Mage in the next patch, since my first one became irrelevant within a week because of patches. I'm gonna start off by saying that nothing that I say is relevant for PvP, and if it is, it's by accident, and I'll only touch on raid a little bit since I don't really care about those forms of content. Now, I wanted to talk about first specifically about Fire Mage and how Fire Mage is going to interact in the new patch, specifically in M+. Fire Mage is still going to be extremely strong, um, and that's not just because of the base class, but because of the powers that you can pick up from the lieutenants. Our best power seems to be Champion's Brand, which while above 70% health, your haste or critical strike chance is increased by 8%. Your highest stat is always chosen. We always want to make this haste, um, and you kind of want to get two Champion's Brands, which is possible in most dungeons very early on. Specifically because this isn't necessarily really 8% for each, because that would just be 16%. But what I have found in playing the game, not sure if intended or a bug, if you have two of these and you would have 31% crit baseline, it would end you up on 51%, but if you would have 30%, it would land you on 49%. Now, you might be thinking, why are these numbers important to us? Haste values for Mage is extremely important, specifically because flame patch ticks increase with haste, and also the number of pyros that you can put into your combustions on single target is higher with haste. Now, if you notice, right now we can be around 25, or in this patch we played around 26-27% haste in Mythic Plus, and then we put everything else into versatility for survivability. Now, when we have external haste from other sources, i.e., the powers that you can pick up, it is okay to go to like 31% haste because with those two powers you can reach 51, which would hit the 50% mark, which means that your flame patches would now get two additional ticks than you would have normally. This doesn't necessarily change anything for our single target because the next one is 53%. But it would change our interaction with combustion within PI windows, or if you would berserk if you're still troll, or if you would time warp slash whatever else you want to use for the bloodlust effect. It would interact differently, and you would get more pyros and more ticks on your flame patch, and so on and so forth. Now, full disclaimer: massive amounts of haste require you to um, trust that you have pressed your buttons correctly. So you don't want to second guess if you pressed Phoenix Flames or whatever, because your APM has to be perfect and your actions have to be executed extremely well for you to get the full benefit of the haste. Because if you're not very comfortable, you're going to feel like the spec is clunky. Because you could fire off two Phoenix Flames or instead of one, or so on and so forth, right? So it's going to take a little bit of use to, but this is basically what's keeping fire in the top spot of Mythic Plus for this season is the haste breakdowns and the stuff that is achievable with the powers, right? Our other option may be Volcanic Plumage, especially because it does fire damage. However, I cannot confirm or deny that this does scale with our conduit or not during combustion. So I'm not going to necessarily say that it's good, but it's also not bad, especially because in recent times it has gotten a buff uh, where it went from this is basically 0.5 times your maximum spell power to 1 times your maximum spell power times 1 plus versatility fire damage to all enemies within 3 yards. Now, this power also becomes significantly better if you have something like Vortex or Chains, Sigil of Chains, or something from your tank or any of your other DPS that can gather the mobs, because 3 yards is actually slightly less than you think. Um, Now, the other things that may change once we hit the bottoms of the trees, um, Dreamweaver might become better than Karain, depending on how long the specific portions of mobs last. Karain, if you can fit your entire combustion, or at least 70% of your combustion into Wild Hunt tactics, and then you can kill the targets from 35% to 0 within 10 seconds, Karain could still be better. Um, However, Dreamweaver just gives you a smooth damage profile, even outside of combustion, because this is just 3% on every target that you have hit. Now, Dream Dweller didn't used to work this way. When I tested Dream Dweller for the first time, it only applied on one target out of all of them. But now, Dream Dweller applies on all of the targets that you hit, and it's going to continue stacking. Now, this isn't only because of the Flame Patch, this is also stacking off of Ignite. So, as long as the target has a periodic damage effect on it, it's going to keep ticking up. I don't have to do anything, and it's going to keep refreshing itself, so that's very good. Another thing is that recently, I think yesterday or the day before, um, Dreamweaver's Field of Blossoms also got buffed, which apparently isn't on the PTR. I didn't even know that's not on the PTR yet. But the duration of Field of Blossoms have been increased by 50%, and it has been increased to 15% instead of 12% haste. Now, what does this mean for us? If we do a single target combustion, um, we would end up using shifting power within that window, and I screwed up here because I'm talking as I'm doing this. But here you would put down Field of Blossoms, and that helps you regenerate your fire blasts way faster, right? Now it's 12%. It would be 15%, so you would generate fire blasts even faster. You can throw them up faster, but it's going to have something to get used to, right? Um, Now, the next thing that has changed for us has been Disciplinary Command. Um, Over here. Disciplinary Command basically works the same. However, now it doesn't start counting your spells until it's completely off of cooldown. Some people say that this might be a nerf to Disciplinary Command because you can't activate it as fast. However, we're going to be 15 to 10 seconds off of our combustion on single target anyway, so it doesn't really matter. However, what this allows us to do is, right now, if Disciplinary Command is on cooldown, it means that we don't have to be scared with blinking, ice blocking, ring of frosting for your tank, ring of frosting for your healer, using any arcane or frost spells at all overall, um, and then being scared that you proc DC before your combustion comes off of cooldown. So you can be much more refined with the usage of Disciplinary Command, and now you get to dictate if it procs or doesn't, um, even if you had a job while it's on cooldown, i.e. if you had to Ring of Frost, or you just had to blink out of a frontal, or whatever. So I see this as a plus rather than a nerf, uh, but overall, it would be a nerf. It's just a quality of life when combustion is a little bit off now. Now, we're going to end up farming combustions back fairly fast anyway, because we're going to be running around dungeons with 51% haste baseline, which is insane. Um, for trinkets, I still think that the Gladiator's badge is going to be the best. Secondary trinket, I still don't know. This is the Soul Cage Fragment, which I've been testing recently. It's not bad. It randomly procs. It has a 2 RPPM, so 2 random procs per minute. On it, where it procs for 173 intellect, it's a little bit more. It drops from the new world boss. Um, it's 105 if it drops from 185 if it drops from the world boss for 15 seconds, and it has 2 random procs per minute, which is fairly nice. However, it's competing with us having the Titanic Ocular Gland. This trinket wouldn't be that great if you could achieve your haste numbers otherwise, which you're going to anyway, because your domination sockets mostly have haste on it, or domination pieces have haste on it, right? The other shoulders that are a domination socket that we would prefer are haste versatility. Um, and again, the chest piece is heavy haste mastery, as we would use this chest piece, right? On the topic of domination sockets, for initial burst, our best domination socket would be the Shard of Core, where your damage is increased by X for 20 seconds after an enemy that you have not attacked yet. You could think of this as First Strike from Qingxin. Essentially, as long as there's an additional enemy that ends up coming in to your pull or whatever, you're going to refresh the entire damage. Now, 3% right now per target, or it doesn't stack. So it just refreshes, it doesn't stack. But it's 3% damage on rank 1. You can upgrade these shards with Soul Embers, and you're going to be able to do that on Korthia. I haven't necessarily tested that, so I can't tell you how much it's going to cost or what it's going to cost, and if it's good. There is an item that lets you remove your shards without destroying them from your items that's going to cost 2000 Stygia, and it is apparently multi-use. So you buy it once and you can use it basically forever. Right, so you don't have to worry about that, but you would have to socket them out, upgrade them, and then put them back in. Our next or second best shard that we would be using is the Shard of These. Damage a target increases your damage done by 0.33% for 4 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. Rank 1 would be 0.99% damage, which isn't that much. But the first time that I've tested this shard, it went on every single enemy. The thing is that last week when they patched the game, it only goes on one enemy now. I'm not sure if this is intended or if it's a bug, but I feel like it is a bug and it should not be in the live version of the game, which then means that you're going to be stacking damage from 2 sources on your primary target. Right? And the last shard that is a damage shard that you would use would be the Blood Shard, which is the Shard of Beck. Your damage is increased by 2% when you have 50% or more health than your target. Right now, I can't seem to get this shard work on training dummies, and I haven't paid attention to this shard in Mythic Plus. However, I think that it doesn't take the percentual value of your HP, rather the actual value of your HP. This might be a bug, but I haven't really paid attention to it, so you're going to have to test it for yourself. That's it. For our conduits, for Mythic Plus, we're going to be running Master of Flame in pretty much every single dungeon. If you play Fire and only Fire and you want to spend your conduit energy on swapping, then you would swap Controlled Destruction in dungeons like Theater, which don't really have very big AoE and it's mostly single target. You would also play Controlled Destruction and Dreamweaver in Raid and Raid Progression. However, if you're in a very high-end guild and you want to play what is best, you wouldn't play Fire. Fire is currently the worst mage spec to perform in the raid. Now, this is high end. This doesn't mean that it's bad for everybody. Um, if you would want to play what is best and just be your absolute top and do as much damage as possible and be as useful in raid as possible, you wouldn't play Fire. You would play Arcane. Uh, the problem with playing Arcane is the fact that you would have to be Kyrian. Kyrian Arcane is just much better than anything else that you can get. That doesn't mean that you can't play Night Fae Arcane, but at that point you can just play Frost or Fire. It doesn't really matter. You're not getting that extra punch that Kyrian Arcane brings, right? Now, on the topic of Frost, you can also play Frost in the raid and in Mythic Plus. Uh, you could also play a comp where you're playing a Fire and the Frost Mage together in one comp because both of them are pretty good for Mythic Plus. Um, for Frost, for most of Frost, you would play Splitting Ice, Freezing Winds. However, if you're doing very, very big pulls, if you're playing with bears and stuff, and you can get pulls of like 20 mobs or more, for something like Halls of Atonement over here, if you could get this entire pull together and then you line of sight it, Frost could benefit from Freezing Rain better than it would from Splitting Ice. And then you would also play Dreamweaver, so you would have to switch. That being said, you could play Corraine as well. For Arcane, you could play Nia because of these things that increase your mastery. But you would play Dreamweaver and you would play Icy Propulsion. That's a no-brainer. And then you could play Ice Bite and Shivering Core if you would be playing with Freezing Rain. And you would play Unrelenting Cold if you would be playing with Splitting Ice. So you get some extra orb damage. You can shatter your orb. If you would play for orb, you would also play Ice Ward. So you can double shatter your frozen orb with the conduit, and you would do extra damage on packs of 5 to 6 mobs. But again, if you can pull big, something like in Halls of Atonement and so on and so forth, you might get more benefit from Freezing Rain. For the legendary for Frost, you would just play Freezing Wind. You could play the Glacial Fragments. You could for pad damage, but I just prefer Freezing Winds because it makes Frost just flow so much better. It makes it less dependent on RNG and if you're going to do single target damage or not. Um, and if you would craft Freezing Winds, you would want it on gloves. It's just this character was copied a while back, so it's still on headpiece, but I would do it on gloves. Um, that's pretty much it. For I already covered the shards, I already covered the trinket. For raid trinkets that I've been looking through, right? Well, okay, World of Warcraft crashed. Congratulations. That's probably because of add-ons and everything. I didn't really pay attention to it. I just drag dropped my folder and what worked, it worked. What didn't, I didn't really care. Um, right. So for raid trinkets, I can't remember the name, but it's the eye that increases your highest stat by 112 is really good. It could be outperformed by the trinket from the world boss, just saying. Um, other than that, uh, okay, like I just can't do that. I can't get other slots. Another thing that's going to stunt Mage behind from other specs is the fact that in raid you cannot get your best conduits. So you cannot get Icy Propulsion from raid. You cannot get Infernal Cascade from raid. You cannot get what's it called? Not Artificer of the Archmage. There's the thing that makes your Touch of the Magi accumulate more damage for Arcane. You cannot get that from the raid. You cannot get your Covenant stuff from the raid yet. So Mage is going to be really, really stunted on that front, especially because we're going to have to farm our conduits the Venari way, basically. It's not going to be Venari that's going to be selling them, but it's going to be the rep grind for random conduits. So depends on how lucky you get or unlucky is how you're going to basically perform. Um, that's pretty much it. If you're a Mythic Plus player, you can play fire just fine. You're going to do just fine. The high haste values are going to be something to get used to. Um, Outside of that, it's gonna be just fine. You can also play Frost. Arcane is also very good, but they don't necessarily benefit that much. Actually, if your highest stat on Arcane would be crit, or your second highest, because you would do Mastery crit, and then haste. If you manage to get your crit above your haste, which you should, and you get Champion's Brand for crit, um, it would be okay. Arcane performs just fine in Mythic Plus. You can play any of the three specs in Mythic Plus, but Fire holds ahead. It just might not look at it in. It just might not look like it in the early stages, because I think all high rated mages are going to play Arcane for their raid progression and everything. So they're obviously going to accumulate more gear, so even if they end up with dungeons with other fire mages, they're probably going to outperform the fire mage because they're just going to be having more gear. Once we get to the point of equilibrium where everyone sort of has the same kind of gear and everything, fire just takes ahead in Mythic Plus. Um, but in raid, it's worse than the other two. If you play Venti or Frost, or if you play Kyrian Arcane, both of those outperform Fire in the raid. Um, yeah, that's about it. Like, I don't have much to say anymore. If you have any questions, you can ask those, but I don't know what else I could be more informative about. So, thank you for watching and goodbye.